Hello, friends, and welcome back to r/ProRevenge. Today, we have another brand new set of crazy revenge stories for you. But before we begin, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. And our first story is, you messed with my time off for the last time. I used to work at the post office as an RCA, which is a rural carrier associate. It was a part-time driver job. It paid well, and I wanted to get the full-time job with benefits. So you have to start somewhere. The full-time driver on my route was Bill. Bill was his own man. He did what he wanted, and the postmaster allowed it. When I was trained, I rode one day with Bill. The next day, Bill called out. I then had to sort the mail and drive the route all alone. It was horrible. The PM should have told him to come in, but he was a spineless man. I didn't finish until around 8 p.m. It should have been around 3 p.m. given the time of year and how long it would eventually take me. My schedule was every Saturday and any vacation day Bill would take. I also covered every time he called out. Now, as this was supposed to be a one-day-a-week job, I had a full-time job as well at my local hospital. My post office job was in the next county over, about 45 minutes away each way. I'd get calls at 6 a.m. from Bill with some BS excuse for him not wanting to come to work. He'd say he had to see an orthodontist today. I worked with these doctors, and I know that there was no way he would be able to get an appointment that early. If he needed an appointment, he should have called me the day before so I could get my second shift job covered. Again, spineless PM would allow it to happen without any recourse. On my anniversary, I told him that I was going to take my wife out to a nice lunch because we're both at our job at the hospital. At 6 a.m., the phone rang. Same lie as always, and I had to go in. I reminded him it was my anniversary, and he said, too bad. I went in totally PO'd. The same thing on my birthday, and then on my wife's birthday. He called out, and I had to work both jobs. A few months later, nothing had changed. I applied to nursing school and was accepted for the fall program. I had several months, so I kept it to myself. My plan was to work the same way I had, and if I was offered a full-time post office job, I'd take it. If not, I'd go to nursing school. Both were really great careers. Bill called out whenever the workload was heavy, like with Sears catalogs. They were the worst. The postmaster would do things like remove all the toilet paper from the bathrooms, thinking we were wasting time pooping, I guess. He'd also turn up the heat in the summer so we'd be miserable and leave on our route faster, which was physically impossible because no matter how hot you got, you still had to sort everything before leaving on your route. Sorting by hand, and I was trying to be very accurate. Now, Bill had gotten remarried shortly before I started with the post office. They never had a chance for a honeymoon, so they put it off. They scheduled a 2-week trip to the Caribbean. When he told me there was a month to go before they left, which was plenty of notice, he told me the tickets were non-refundable, so don't screw me over. I'd had enough of Bill and the PM screwing me over all the time, so 10 days or so before he left, I put in my 2-week notice. The PM assumed I'd worked through Bill's vacation. Nope, just the first 4 days. Bill called me at home. Man, I've been good to you. You've got to cover my time off. The vacation's non-refundable. I remind him of all the times he's lied to force me to cover, and the days I had to work for him, like my anniversary, my birthday, my wife's birthday, etc. Also, how he screwed me over in orientation, making my first several weeks miserable. I left the day I said I would. The PM refused to cover, and Bill had to cancel the trip and come back in and work. I love nursing, so I made the best choice. A good lesson for Bill. What goes around comes around. And our next story. You won't pay rent? Good luck finding a new apartment. So this happened to me about 10 years ago in a big city on the West Coast. Hopefully this counts as pro-revenge. I had just finished grad school and was looking for a way to cut down on rent in an already expensive rental market. Now, mind you, I was young, desperate, and inexperienced with roommates at the time, and this was a huge life lesson for me, and hopefully for my roommate too. I placed an ad for a roommate on Craigslist, which in hindsight wasn't a smart move. Enter bad roommate. Bad roommate was a few years older than me, and at first seemed really cool with a stable job as a licensed masseuse. After interviewing her, hitting it off really well, and getting to know each other for about a month, we rented a loft in downtown around October with the agreement rent and utilities would be split. Around the time our first rent was due, November, bad roommate said that her work had been slow and she'd pay rent in the next 2 weeks. Luckily, I had enough savings, so I covered rent. Well, the 2 weeks came and went, and still no rent. When I asked about the rent, she yelled obscenities and accused me of being abusive and harassing her. No kidding. While claiming she didn't have money for rent, she would be out of the house from 9 a.m. until 2 a.m. visiting friends. All this nonsense continued on, as well as other things such as stealing my food and breaking some of my belongings, including a bottle of wine that my recently deceased sister had given me. Bad roommate's excuse was bad energy in the house, while giving me a little smirk. Fast forward to the beginning of December, and you guessed it, still no rent. This time, in addition to yelling obscenities, accusing me of being abusive, and breaking my stuff, bad roommate called the police on me, accusing me of making threats. The cops did not do anything, as there was no evidence I did anything. For the record, I didn't. But they did give me a lecture about making threats and said next time they come out, I could be arrested or forced to leave the residence. By this time, I was almost out of savings and was fearing eviction. Bad roommate had not paid rent since move-in. The final straw came when I came home from work to find her threatening my 2 cats who were cowering in the corner. I almost lost it, but due to what happened before with the police, I didn't want to poke the fire. This is when I remembered the officer saying I could be forced to leave the residence, and a light bulb went off in my head. Now the revenge part. I called my best friend, whose father, best friend's dad/attorney, was an attorney. After a phone consultation with him, he told me to pay up the rent and utilities through December, then simply surrender my key, garage remote, etc., with a signed note saying that I surrender possession of the property with a specified date. I snapped a photo of this note and left it with the secretary in the management office. I then proceeded to sign a new lease with the last of my savings 1 week before Christmas while bad roommate was out visiting friends. I packed up all of my belongings and left the house pretty much empty, except for the little bit of belongings she had, a little bit of food, and her bed. After about 2 days of angry voicemails, texts, and missed calls from bad roommate telling me what a horrible and irresponsible person I was to do this, boom, dead silence until April. In April, I was served with a summons for breach of contract for abandoning the lease by the landlord. I contacted the attorney, aka best friend's dad, and filed a response to the court with a hearing date set in late May. I showed up to the hearing with my friend's dad, attorney, and his 2, I'm guessing they were assistants. Bad roommate was also there looking smug, think wine bottle incident smirk. Next thing I know, the other attorney announces they are dismissing me from the lawsuit since I surrendered possession of the property, but they were not dismissing it against bad roommate. Bad roommate's face went gaunt. The smirk disappeared, and it was priceless. After some back and forth with her almost getting held in contempt of court for outbursts, the judge ruled against my roommate with a full judgment awarded to the landlord. The first cherry on top, best friend's dad represented me pro bono. The final cherry on top, I came to find out a month later via an angry voicemail from bad roommate that after being kicked out of a friend's house while couch surfing, her credit was trashed. She had an eviction on her record and subsequently could not get another apartment, and that again I was a horrible, irresponsible person. I never heard from her again. Afterwards, she was on the news a few months later, mugshot and all, for trashing a convenience store. Last I heard, she moved to Vegas. In the end, my credit did take a small hit. Even though the suit was dismissed, the debt was put into collections and reported to the credit bureau. For the next 4 years, I tried unsuccessfully to have it removed. At the 4-year anniversary of the lawsuit, I petitioned the credit bureau under the advice of my friend's dad/attorney to clear my record as the statute for filing suit had expired at the 4-year mark. Failure to comply with the request would result in a lawsuit against the credit bureau for slander of credit. To be honest, I just followed his instructions, not knowing what I was even talking about. A couple days later, I received a call that my record had been cleared. Long story, but in the end, it was worth it to get back at an otherwise horrible person. She sounds terrible. I oddly pictured her as an evil Phoebe from Friends. Must be the masseuse job. And our last story. Cement revenge. I saw a post on here from about a year ago about how a guy reinforced his mailbox to stop his neighbor from running it over, and it reminded me of something my dad did to our a-hole neighbors years ago. When I was little, our next-door neighbors were the biggest a-holes. They constantly messed with us, insulted us, threw garbage on our house, etc. One thing they used to do was knock over these wooden poles we had in our grass, the part that separates our houses, with the bumper of their SUV, and drive through our grass to get to their driveway. And when my dad would confront them, they would always tell us off and say, "Sue me." That happened a lot. And my dad waited till they were gone on vacation and dug all the poles out, then made the holes really big and proceeded to fill them all with big bags of concrete, then put in new longer poles, put the grass back, and waited. Well, when they got back, it wasn't but a few days later, we hear a big bang and go outside to see the back of their SUV all jacked up. Our neighbor proceeds to lose his crap, saying my dad had to pay for the damage, and my dad just smiled and said, "Sue me," and walked back inside. They were still a-holes, but damn, that was still pretty funny. I know a couple more stories about them, but I don't know if anybody'd be interested in them. Good fences make good neighbors. Strong fences make a-hole neighbors cry. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video to the end, and I'll see you in the next one.